you. Hello.
Sam's Grill.
Oh, we're moving.
Sam's Grill.
Oh, you got maps, all right.
Okay.
I think that some of our members like to be sure there were alcoholic
Oh.
beverages available.
No
Gotta go that
problem.
direction.
Okay. Get the memo? Sam's Grill.
Sam's Grill?
Yep.
Where is that?
I know where it is.
Good thing you asked.
It's on the frontage road.
Okay, is it down by the auto dealer?
Yeah.
By Scandinavia?
Closer to
Neither, but,
Normandale than
gotta be,
Grant.
Okay,
used to be something called the Southgate Office Plaza, 10-story building right there.
It used to be,
And,
Queen Anne Kitty Land.
anyway, we'll talk about it after.
that old castle, is it?
no. It's on the other side. It's on Bloomington side.
Okay.
Excuse me.
I hate to turn off these fancy colors I've got here. I like it.
Come back.
Rats.
Okay. Good evening. I'm calling the meeting to order of the Bloomington Board of Education. Today is Monday, June 17th, and members present, with the exception of Nelly Korman, whom I spoke to earlier today. Hope Nelly's still planning on being here, so we should see her shortly. You have an agenda that's provided in advance of the meeting. Is there a motion to accept that agenda?
So moved. So, second.
Moved and second, all in favor? Aye?
Aye?
Aye.
Okay, and then we will move to our new principal introductions, and we are glad to have with us today our Chris Lennox, our assistant superintendent, who will be introducing some new principals to us this evening. Chris, please.
Thank you. Chairman Culver, Superintendent Fujitaki, and members of the board. I'm pleased to be here tonight to have 3 of our 4 new principal leaders in the district, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them, but then give them an opportunity also to address you. I'll start immediately to my right with Mr. Andrew Wilkins. Andrew will be the new principal at Washburn Elementary School. He's coming to us from Central Elementary, which is in the Norwood Young America School District. He's been the principal there since 2009. Andrew also served as an elementary school principal in Chamberlain, South Dakota, and taught in the Rosemont Apple Valley Egan School District. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Andrew Wilkins. Andrew.
Thank you. As you said, I'm currently out in Norwood Young America, which is a smaller school district west of Chaska. I've been out there for 4 years. And prior to that, I was in Chamberlain, South Dakota. So if you're familiar with fishing and hunting, that's the place to be. Prior to that, I was a teacher and coach up in the Apple Valley Rosemount Egan School District for 9 years. So I've been in education for quite a while. I live down in Newmarket, Minnesota, which is just down 35 a little ways, so I'm excited about the shorter commute. I am married. I have 3 children, a daughter, Kaylee, who's 11, who will be starting middle school, which I'm not excited about. A son that is 8, going into 3rd grade, and then I have a little daughter that is 6, and she's going into 2nd grade this year, August birthday. I'm just excited. I sat in on a meeting this morning. I was able to meet the admin team and some of the people I'm going to be working with, and I'm very excited at the opportunity and the direction that this district's going, and I think it's going to be a real boost for myself and for the school. So thank you.
Welcome. Thanks. Next, we have Mr. Brian Klein. Brian will be the new principal at Oak Grove Elementary School. For the last 2 years, Brian has served as an elementary instructional mentor here in the Bloomington Public Schools. He originally joined the Bloomington team in 2006 as a teacher at Valley View Elementary. And prior to that, Brian worked out in Washington, D.C., teaching kindergarten, 4th, and 5th grade out there. So welcome, Mr. Brian Klein.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Excited to be here. I've been a part of Bloomington now for 7 years, and just, I'm in love with this district. I think we have just fantastic leadership from the top all the way down, and it's so exciting to be a part of it in a new position. You know, I've been everything from a classroom teacher down in kindergarten up to 5th grade interventions. In the last 2 years, I've served as the mentor for new teachers in Bloomington at the elementary level. So you might have seen me on different things from New Teacher Week to any other district committee. So I really know Bloomington well, and I'm just honored to get the opportunity to go be at Oak Grove. And I've spent the last few months here meeting and learning the programming and the different activities and things that Oak Grove is doing, and I couldn't be more excited to get going. So thank you.
And finally, I would like to introduce Mr. Kevin Groebner, who will be taking over as the principal at Jefferson High School. Kevin has served as the assistant principal at Jefferson since 1998, and prior to coming to Bloomington, he held administrative positions in both Lakeville and St. Louis Park. His teaching background is in the area of social studies, and we are thrilled to have Kevin taking over for Mr. Hill at Jefferson. Kevin.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, everybody. I'm, as Brian and Andrew have stated, I'm really excited to be in this position. I grew up in Bloomington and went to the old Lincoln High School, and, from a personal standpoint, I think it's great that I'm able to continue, not that I was planning on leaving, because I wasn't, but I'm, really excited to be able to continue working at Jefferson in the position of principal. And as Brian mentioned too, I've been here 15 years, and I think Bloomington is a terrific school district. All the different district meetings I'm a part of, and the work that we've been doing at Jefferson over the years, the staff that we work with, everybody, as Brian said, from all the way through. It's a caring district. The staff cares about kids. The staff cares about staff, and I'm tickled to be able to continue working in this capacity. So thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity to come tonight and introduce you to some of our key new leaders.
Thank you all for being here tonight. And I'd like to suggest we just take a short break so that we can do official greeting here. If you want to follow Arlene around this way, and we'll shake hands and welcome. And if there's anyone else from your family you'd like to introduce us to who's here tonight as well.
Watch out, Arlene's going to want to
So
give
let's
you a
take
hug.
3.
Kevin, when do you graduate from Lincoln? 71. You're younger than I am. I remember the name.
My brother he graduated in either 60 or 60. Tom.
I'm old. Can't remember.
So Director Korman is now here, so all board members are present. And first item on our formal agenda then is preliminary budgets. Now we're moving into the new academic year, 2013-2014. And our Executive Director for Finance, Rod Zivkovich, will be making presentation to us tonight. Rod?
Chair Culver, Superintendent Fujitaki, board members, here tonight to do the last of our budgets for the 13-14 school year. This is an information and preparation for the school board of taking action on the proposed 13-14 budget. We're not looking for any decisions by the board tonight. And if you feel that you have questions or comments, please feel free to give me them. If you look at our overall strategic plan, what we talked about many times, we have our program areas, we have our supporting plans to those program areas, and part of the finance plan is the annual budget. Back on May 28th, we brought most of the non-general fund budgets to the board. Tonight we'll be talking about the operating fund or the general fund. Again, no action is needed. On the 24th, we'll be bringing a resolution to the board for approval of all the funds. So if we look at the general fund, if we look first at our revenues for this next year, school year, are proposed at $111 million. If you look at our overall, the state, which is our formula revenue, special education revenue, is almost $80 million, or 72% of the total revenue budget. Levy is 22%, federal is 4%, and others is 2%. If you look at the overall state formula revenue, which is the biggest portion of the budget, it's basically built off of number of students times a weighted or a dollar amount per student. So if we first look at our students, we see our enrollment has been flat over the years, both our average daily membership, which is our students sitting in a seat over the year, and then our average marginal computed pupil units, which is actually weighting those students. So you see, for the last 4 years, we've been fairly flat over time. Now, if we look at the revenue per student, the state provided a 1.5% increase on the formula. If we look at from 10-11, we saw a $346,000 increase. There wasn't anything on the formula, but we saw some increase in our enrollment. In 11-12, there was a 1%. 12-13, a 1%. And the reason for the drop between 11-12 and 12-13, there was a slight decline in enrollment. And then from 13 to 14, we showed that 1.5% increase. So if we look at our overall revenue budget, kind of looking at it in the different categories, our general fund allowance, which we just talked about, our special ed, and so for our 13-14 budget, you see that the total is $69 million. That's up slightly from our 2012-13, mainly due to the formula increase, and then also increases in special ed funding. Our other state funding is fairly flat, levy fairly flat, federal programs down slightly. Part of that is due to the cutbacks at the federal level, and then also in 12-13 there were carryovers to our federal programs that we had to spend within the 12-13 school year. As we move on to expenditures, as you can see, our overall expenditure breakdown of $115 million. If we look at it more in detail, our instructional area, $56 million or 49%. Special ed, another 23.6%. Our support, instructional student support, 11.1. Our operational, custodial, and administration, and then district support, and then other. If you look at, this is another kind of way of looking at it. If you remember back in the early days of the Plenty administration, they talked about 70% of the general fund budget being focused on the classroom. There was always a kind of a struggle of what that all included. We've done this over the last few years of trying to break out what areas within the general fund budget really are directly related to the classroom. And you see that it's the instructional area there, and then the kind of aqua area. And you can see as an overall, of that $115 million budget, $100 million of it is related to classroom or support of the classroom, which is 87.3%. So if we look at the overall budget, this year's revised budget was set up that we would be expenditures over revenue by $2 million. Based on where we're looking at right now, I think that we'll probably break even this year. We won't be short the $2 million. As we move into next year, we show that we have a shortfall of $4 million. We'll have committed funds, revenue that, or fund balance that we set aside for our referendum to offset that of $4.3 million to get us back to our 5% fund balance goal. So if you look at really, as an overall, the budget, kind of the changes between the 2 years, our revenue is up based on the 1.5% of the state formula and some additional special ed dollars. Expenditures are up about $3 million by just inflationary and normal increase of which is about $3 million a year. And then the remaining 1.3 is intervention programs that were added to the budget for this year. So in conclusion, we'll be bringing back a resolution next Monday night for the board to approve all of the budgets that are up there for the 13-14 school year. Questions?
Yes, Mark?
So we've just finished our second year on the sixth period day. How do our expenditures look with respect to that versus what was projected back when we made that change?
Are you saying did we see the savings for that reduction?
Right, I'm asking, have we seen the savings that we anticipated seeing?
Yes, we did.
Exactly, less or more?
I would say probably within $50,000 of what we were expecting.
And then the other thing that occurred to me the other day is we used to see staffing allocations, and I don't think we've seen those this year. Why is that?
We used to show the board ratios or that they would do staffing on, and since the staffing ratios have not changed, that's all part of the budget itself. So since those ratios didn't change, we didn't bring them to the board this year.
But some of us are new, so we don't know what they are. So maybe we can have them come to us soon?
Yep.
Hey, Lyle, continue.
You mentioned 1.3 million were for intervention programs. What are those?
There were, within the budget itself, we added $4.5 million, or not $450,000 for the pre-K program, so that we would be able to serve all parties that needed to be served. Tom Holton's program that he provided to the board. At both the secondary and at the elementary levels, we also added intervention support of $450,000 to each of those areas also. So at the elementary area, if I'm, make sure I'm correct, Chris, we added a 0.5 per school. And at the secondary level, it was a 1.0 per school?
It was, I believe, 0.7 at middle schools.
Okay.
And those staffing allotments, those extra staffing allotments, 1.0 and 0.7 and so forth, that was up to the discretion of the building administrative team?
At the elementary, it was really focused on math, specifically intervention. At the secondary, a little bit more flexibility based on their schedule of students.
My knee-jerk reaction is there any money in here for the achievement gap? Repeating the question, Chris, is there any money in this budget, the new budget, such as intervention programs, for addressing the achievement gap?
Effective strategies in mathematics, in pre-K, and at secondary should all have an impact on increasing performance for the students who need the most help. And so we'll be analyzing the degree to which the gap has been closed at the end of the year when we get all of the MCA scores, et cetera. But that would be the hope, is that all students benefit and that the students who need to gain the most actually gain the most.
You know, I bring up that achievement gap because I walked out of this meeting last week, a little surprised and, let's say surprised, when we heard about the QCOM program, and they admitted up front they put zero effort, zero money into the achievement gap. And that's one of our goals, that's one of your goals, Les. And still we are seeing nobody address the achievement gap. I don't see any special money in this new budget. I don't see QCOM last year addressing the achievement gap, but I understand they are going to have it as part of next year's QCOM plan. But let's talk about the achievement gap. Why is it getting no attention?
Are you addressing anyone in?
Well, I
Specific.
was hoping somebody could address why we're getting, nobody's addressing the achievement gap. I mean, we know it's part of our goal, we know it's part of the superintendent's goals.
Right. It was a little bit difficult working with the state QComp people. A number of our buildings set specific goals for gap reduction, and they were rejected by the state. You weren't allowed to set different goals for different subgroups, that the school goal had to be based on all students. And so I had to change the goals, even though that's what the faculty had voted for. Now, the teacher goals and the PLC goals, I think, are pretty closely related to gaps, as they emphasize response to intervention, et cetera. And Chris can give you more detail on that.
And I concur. We had to use specifically MCA, in most cases, data and assessment for MDE to approve those goals on all students, not subgroups of students, but on all students. And those are proficiency measures. And I think we've been in front of the board, or this district, I think, multiple times, just in the year I've been here and over time, talking about the importance of growth goals, and really looking at our kids moving, and are they increasing and seeing growth. We were not allowed to use those goals, and we weren't allowed to use sub-goals. But each site, as Dave mentioned, does have goals they're looking at within their student population to address students who are not achieving where they should be. The other thing we've talked about, and Dave can probably share some of the math on this too, the other way we don't want to close the achievement gap is by having students regress to the mean, if you will, to have some of our highest achieving students come down, over time. And we want to make sure, that's why we want to look at growth, and as we do our work along with Pathways to Graduation, hit specific standards and measures to make sure students are achieving at those levels. And if they're not, why not? So not just simply targeting groups of students based on gender, race, or other factors, but really looking at a standard and saying, here's where we want all of our third graders, who's making it, who's not, and what interventions do we need in place to address those who are not. So within the school, within the PLC, some of that's happening, but it didn't come through in the QComp presentation because we weren't allowed. In fact, I believe Chairman Culver, you were on the phone when I specifically asked that question of MDE, if we would be allowed to change that for next year. And Mr. Heisted's working on that, with the state to try to allow for that flexibility. We'll need that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but the $1.3 million that we have in this budget is to help the kids that are struggling. At the different levels. So I think that there is additional dollars in this budget for addressing the achievement gap or kids that are struggling.
That's 1.3 out of 111 million. That's less than 1%. In other words, I guess somehow, some way, I would like to confer to the administration and to the board that we need, as a district, to address the achievement gap. We cannot just continue with saying, oh, it's a goal, but it's, are we making any progress? And how are we going to make that progress? And if we are going to make some progress, we need to put some cash behind the project. So long-range planning, I think we need to talk achievement gap.
I would imagine, Lyle, that every teacher in every classroom, every time they put together a lesson plan, feels that they're addressing directly any kind of achievement gap that happens in their classroom. I think it's unfair to say that the district isn't doing anything about an achievement gap. I think that's wrong. We have teachers here tonight who I'm sure would be happy to sit up here and tell us differently. Now, that's not why they're here. But to say that the district isn't doing anything to address an achievement gap is wrong. I disagree with that.
Well, if I may, Dick, I don't think that's what Lyle was saying.
That's what I heard come out of his
Okay.
mouth.
And Lyle might like to, speak for himself here as well, but what I think it's important to interject here is that this board and administration will be going through a planning process as we move into the new academic year. My intent is that we will have an opportunity to speak with each other as a board at length about some goal setting for the coming year. And what that often involves is discussing what resources it takes to address those goals. What Lyle is speaking to is something that has been identified as a board goal, and in fact, a public education goal here in Minnesota and throughout the country is working to close the achievement gap. The question we might ask is, are we allocating enough special resources for additional instruction to provide support for teachers? I don't think Lyle means to question the sincerity and the effort of people who are currently working in our schools. But as a classroom teacher myself, I understand how helpful it can be to have additional support in the classroom or opportunities to bring students together in groups that are dedicated to specific areas of instruction to augment what is available in classroom instruction. And I think his question as to what additional resources we are providing, and he asked that in regard to that specific line item, I think are appropriate, and we maybe need to expand on that as we do our planning for the coming year to say, is that enough, and how do we know what good it is doing, and how much more effective might we do with additional approaches, additional resources, both human and financial buys human resources as well. So, Lyle, if you want to speak to that, any additional with any additional comments, but I think it is important, and as some other things that we have identified that we feel are important in the district, we need to all get on the same page about what that means to us and how best to express that.
I would agree 100%. I know the teachers are doing their job and so forth, but if you're going to address a shortcoming, you need to give it special attention. You need to give it extra money, more staffing, more strategies, things like that. It's not going to happen by osmosis. I mean, you have to address the achievement gap. You have to target that as a goal. You have to fund that as a goal. You have to put staffing there. It's just not going to happen overnight. So that's why I was interested in that 1.3. And, you know, you gave a 0.5 to an elementary building, and you give a 0.7 to a middle school building. I've been in education long enough that the 0.5 staffing, you know, to me, that's about $45,000. That's not going to do the trick. So, long-range planning, I'd like to have somebody pay attention to the achievement gap and put some funding there.
Sir Culver?
Yes,
Please
please,
respond.
Superintendent.
Our strategic plan, which is up there, we address all learners. That includes children who live in poverty and our diverse population of students. Over the years, we've brought to the board all the different programs that we're doing to help address the achievement gap, but to address all learners, not just students who live in poverty and our minority students. Recently, we brought the AVID program to the board. We brought the Nobel program. We have brought English Learners program, early childhood programs. All are targeted toward helping all our learners, but specifically to help students and students who live in poverty. We've also brought to the board other programs about the post-secondary work we're doing. And that's, again, to address this disparity gap and achievement gap we have. We brought a number of programs over the years, and they're all embedded in the budget that was being presented. So we have brought to the board the different kinds of programs, and those are just a few of the programs that we brought to the board about what we're doing to address the achievement gap. We started off in early childhood, we moved to early L, we talked about the intervention programs, we talked about Scholastic, which addresses the needs of kids outside of the school. We talk about extended day, extended year programming, which is summer school and after-school programming, all focused on helping kids who live in poverty, and often they are minority students. So we have brought to the board all these different things, all these programs that we have. We're not highlighting it in this report, but we have highlighted it to the board over the years. And we will continue to bring those things. The response to interventions is another program that we are focused on to address students who live in poverty and are minority students. And we'll continue to bring these things because we would like to close the achievement gap. We are focused on that pathways to graduation is focused, but it's to address all learners and to maximize their learning potential and to make sure that they graduate high school with a career or college plan. That's the way we tend to help all our learners. So we'll continue to bring programs throughout the year to the board, and maybe we will be more clear in how they will help address the achievement gap.
Hey, any other questions or comments regarding this presentation on the budgeting? Yes, Nelly.
I just wanted to say that I have no doubt that the district is putting a lot of effort into addressing the achievement gap. But I have to agree that it really is difficult once you are in the classroom to try to focus on those students who are not achieving, simply because sometimes there's not enough resources. There's too many students too. And when as an interpreter that I have been for the district for many years, I've seen the achievement gap starting right there, the very first day, when the parents come for the very first time with their students. And part of that is because of the lack of understanding between teachers or administration and parents, because many times is the language barrier. And what I'd like to ask you is, when it comes to interpreters and translators, the Language Ambassador Program, this program is part of the general fund, right?
Correct.
Do you have an idea what is the percentage that we put in for funding the services?
I would know the exact number. I'm thinking maybe $200,000 would be in the
For
total
the
budget.
language ambassadors?
Yeah.
Yes. Would it be possible to get that kind of information? And I also like to know if this is equal funding for all schools, or some schools have to fund it themselves, or how would that work? I'd just like to get some more information about that.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Anything further, Nelly?
Mhm.
Other board members?
Between now and Monday, next week, Monday, I'm a real big believer, as you are, as the district is, in having what I'm gonna call rainy day funds and for emergency funds. And, last 2 weeks ago, we saw all kinds of budgets with its own fund balance, if that would be the word, or rainy day fund. Or could we have a sum total of those funds, just to see what that adds up to? If you had to give me a knee-jerk reaction, what that sum total would be right now, would that be 10 million, 20 million? How much would that be? What percentage? I know with the advice of the CFAC group, we want a 5% fund balance in the operating, but we have all kinds of other funds. So maybe I should just stop and ask you to supply us with a fund balance, subtotals, and then a grand total, and you don't have to take a guess today.
So are you looking for all funds, community education?
A to Z.
Okay.
And then have we received a summary of designated funds here at the end of the year, going into the new year? I mean, often we have that as well,
You'll
so.
provide in the next board meeting, there'll be a resolution for categories, but it won't be the dollar amount of those
Okay.
categories.
Can we get some dollar amounts either in that meeting or?
I can give it
Close
to,
on to
I
that
will give
meeting?
it to you with the rest of the board information. Everything comes right out of the audit report.
So very generally, if you look at, I'm on slide 20 of 22, I agree with CFAC and so forth. You have 5% as, I think it was the recommendation of CFAC. But if you put those committed funds together with the ending fund balance, we're sitting at $10 million, which would be about 9% right alone in the operating budget.
Correct, but also realize that we are negative spending this year within this budget.
Mhm.
So it becomes that it is a $4 million deficit, so we're eating into that fund balance in this year. So, and if we show that our growth is growing at a 3% rate, and we're getting approximately 1.5% from the state, that deficit going into next year will be even greater. It'll probably be somewhere in the $6 to $7 million range. So the funds that we have set aside are one-time dollars. So they get eaten up pretty quickly when you're deficit spending.
And I'll go back to a question I think Mark asked, and you responded that you think at the end of the budget year, we will be pretty much break even.
For this year, the $2 million. The shortfall of $2 million this year, I think, will be a break even.
Okay.
Other questions? then thank you for your report today. Appreciate you being here. And
I just want to clarify to make sure that I have all the pieces that the board is looking for before next Monday, so we don't have any issues. The board is looking for staffing ratios.
Yes.
The board is looking for fund balance totals and subtotals. And that also we want to look into language ambassadors. Does that cover everything? Okay, thank you.
hey, thanks again. Item number 2, and I want to invite our guests to the table now, under the direction of our chief statistician and expert on
Thank you, Chair
evaluating
Culver.
student progress, David Heisted, flipped instruction presentation.
Thank you very much, Chairman Culver, Superintendent Fujitaki, and board directors. I'm pleased to be here with a team of folks that have gone from brainchild to implementation to data collection, and I just had the fun part of doing the data analysis at the end. So we'll start with Andy Bedeau and Sean Beaverson talking about the model, and then we'll have Holly and Kelsey talk about the implementation and things that they were really excited to find out about flipped instruction, and then at the end I'll talk about the actual study.
Good evening. I'm going to give a little bit of the background of how the flipped instruction cohort began. As part of, well, it started at Kennedy High School with 2 teachers, Megan Alberg and Jessica Rice, who had heard about an instructional tool set called Flipped and decided to investigate whether or not that would work for their advanced algebra class, I believe. On a side note, both Jessica and Megan are presenting on Wednesday at a national flipped conference, so that's pretty exciting, and they deserve a nod for that work. They were excited about it. They asked me, I'm Sean Beaverson, the secondary technology coordinator, for some support. Our conversations led to the decision that it would be a reasonable request to the GATE committee to dedicate some of the referendum funds to support a cohort for both professional development and development of instructional materials. A group of 25 teachers from secondary and then fewer from elementary joined that cohort and did the work throughout the year. That's primarily the background of how this started. I think it's fairly exciting work that's been done, and I will pretty much be done, and I'll turn it over to Andy from here because she gets the fun work of sharing the work that these elementary teachers did.
So thank you again, Andy Bedeau, Elementary Technology Coordinator. And just again, to give you some more context, we've talked about flipped before, but what it is basically having video instruction for homework, and then in class there is time for homework, which would be the application of the concepts that have been learned. One of the things that I really think why flipped has sort of taken off in this classroom that we're talking about is because the video is really helping kids understand lower Bloom's taxonomy. So remembering, understanding kinds of concepts. And the neat thing about this is they can review the videos, they can watch them over again. So really, again, these are lower level skills that kids can learn at their own pace. So then when they come into the classroom for the following day, their homework is really, again, the application and the practice, which on Bloom's taxonomy is the higher order thinking skills that we want kids to be engaged in. So if you think about a more traditional classroom, time may be spent on both lower level skills and also the higher order skills. This classroom is an example where they can spend more time on the higher order critical thinking skills, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's been a keeper in their case. I'm not going to go through all the benefits, but I'm just going to highlight a couple that in conversations with Holly and Kelsey that they have mentioned has been impactful. So again, I talked about the ability to learn at varying speeds because kids can stop and pause the video, take notes during the video, rewind it, look at it later on for review before a test. Another benefit for students is that parents can also be involved in the process. So having that ability to connect with home, parents in this case may not understand the math teaching. For example, I know lattice math, I don't really understand it either, but having that ability to support their students at home has been a really good side benefit to flipped instruction. And one that really sort of hit home with me was having students being able to take ownership of their learning. So when they come to class, they have choice. So there's certain things that they need to do during class time, and then they have projects that they can choose. So really looking at their different learning styles and being able to have some choice in their work has been a benefit for students. For the teachers, again, there's more time where they can help the students with the practice and the application, the higher order skills that we want our kids to be involved in. One other aspect of this, it's really good teaching, is that Holly and Kelsey know before students come the next day who they need to meet with. So they're better able to differentiate their instruction. They're better able to form small groups for intervention or enrichment, or even to work one-on-one. So that's been a benefit for them. And then also being able to collaborate together. Holly and Kelsey have been on this journey together, and really I think that's been one of the reasons they've been successful, is because they've been able to share and collaborate together in this work. So Holly and Kelsey are here. They're both fifth grade teachers at Normandale Hills, and I just wanted to just mention a few things about their journey, and then I'll let them talk about some of the highlights from this year. So one of the things that we always think about with flipped instruction is that it's really about the video. In this case, the video was replacing the direct instruction that previously took place in their classroom. They also added an additional benefit so that students would watch a video, most of the time, 5 or 10 minutes long? So they would watch a video at home, and then Holly and Kelsey created a form which students would answer a set of questions. So there were 4 practice questions that students would answer. This is how they were able to differentiate for the next day. So if the students had the answers right, they were able to enrich, so have activities that would enrich their instruction. If they needed more review with that skill, Holly and Kelsey could meet with them in a small group or in a one-to-one situation. So really this is a good example of how technology could help them become better teachers. They knew, even before the kids walked into the classroom the next day, who they needed to meet with. Instead of in a more traditional model, they may not know until a couple days after they give a quiz or they have a chance to look at that homework, which students are struggling and where. This is another example, this is from Holly, of what it looks like in their classroom. So we talked about that they have more time for application and practice. So Holly has broken down her class time. You can see the chunks of time at the bottom into appetizers, which are things that all the kids have to do. And then they have entrees, where this is sort of the choice time where they get to work on a project for that unit. And then they have an exit slip so that she can still do another formative assessment before they leave for that day. So currently, there was one other teacher at Ridgeview, Martha Palm, who took part in the flipped cohort. So we had a relatively small number. There was more of a secondary presence this past year. But because of the good work that was done by the elementary teachers, next year we will have 17 additional elementary teachers who represent 7 of the 10 elementary schools in the district. So I'm really looking forward to work with them and see the results that they have. And now I'll turn it over to Holly and Kelsey, and they can comment on their journey this past year.
Did you want to start?
I'm Kelsey. I just want to give you, just so you have it in your minds, what this looks like for the kids, because I know this can be kind of difficult to wrap our heads around, especially since it's a brand new thing. So the kids will come in to class, and they will come in with a notebook full of problems that they completed at home, and that was part of those forms that you just saw. So in addition to the kids showing their work in their notebook, they also completed a Google form that we make. It's really quick and easy for us to make, and we can see before the kids even walk in, like Andy said, what they've completed. So the kid walks in, and then we immediately start to go over questions that they have from the video that they watched at home the night before. So the kids at home are watching about a 5 to 7 minute video along with completing 4 to 5 practice problems that are based on that video.
And just really quick, the form, once they submit their 4 answers, those go directly to our email accounts. So a spreadsheet pops up of our kids' data, and that's how we're able to see who has met the goal and who has not. It shows up in spreadsheet form in our emails. So as they click enter or submit, we're getting that data sitting on the couch at night watching TV. So it just starts flowing in.
One thing we do as well, every once in a while, we don't do this with every assignment, but we will actually put the answers as the kids click submit, the solutions will pop up, so it's immediate feedback for the kids as well. They really like that because they like to know that they're doing it right. At the elementary level, we don't have the formal textbooks that secondary does where the kids can go to the back and check the answers. So that's something that we incorporate in there as well. And so the kids come in, we go over the video, we go over the questions, and then the rest of the class is spent applying those skills and coming up with projects, and that's been the lion's share of the work for the two of us, is finding these projects that align with the standards, that are gonna benefit the kids, and that we think the kids are gonna like. And that's where we've made a lot of our progress, and we'll get into that, and we can answer questions about that in a little bit.
I think my biggest aha through this whole implementation is, wow, I used to think there's never enough time in my 70 or 80 minutes of math time. There's not enough time to get to all the kids. And you end the day feeling stressed out and just feeling like, oh my goodness, I wanted to get to so much more than I did. And with flipped instruction, taking that direct instruction portion, which is supposed to be 15 minutes, sometimes when you have 5, 6, 7, 8 kids who are like, I don't get it, and your direct instruction goes from 15 minutes to 30 minutes, and then half your class period is gone. So with this video being online, they're able to watch it over and over and over again if they're not understanding it, and that whole direct instruction piece, that maybe 30 minutes that would have taken my class time before, is now all at home. So, and as their answers are coming in online, I'm able to form my groups, and then the next day in class I'm meeting with 1 kid, sometimes just 1, sometimes groups of 2 to 3, but that's that differentiation piece that I think is so important. We were talking about achievement gap and how we can get these kids to grow. I just feel like flipped instruction is such an answer to that, because you're able to see right away who are those kids that didn't grow last night and what can I do to get them where they need to be. And then those kids that got it, and what can we do for them too? What can they be doing in class to increase their knowledge and to grow as well? So I now feel that class time is just super beneficial for me and for the kids, and I feel like for the first time I do have enough time to get to all the kids and do my job. So that was my biggest aha this year, more time.
The kids like it, they really do, and we took a couple surveys just of the kids throughout the year, because this was brand new to us, and we wanted to do something that we thought would work, and we kind of saw, January, February, wow, we're getting through our entire curriculum. So then we thought, okay, what else should we do? And so then we searched for standards and ways to supplement our curriculum, so we made sure our kids were as ready as they possibly could to go on to 6th grade, some of them 7th and 8th grade math from 5th grade. And the time, like Holly said, the time with the kids and being able to keep their attention, they're engaged the entire class. You don't have that look of kids just sitting there, 30 kids looking at a whiteboard waiting for the teacher to finish talking so that they can get to work. That doesn't exist anymore. The kids come in, maybe have 5 minutes of whole group instruction just talking about the video, answering questions about the video, and then they're off working. And like Holly said, maybe we meet with 1 kid, maybe we meet, and even if we are only meeting with 1 kid, because we're able to identify what they need so soon, I could meet with every single kid in my class one-on-one every single day if I needed to. Thankfully with this, I don't have to, but if I needed to, I could, because there's enough time. We're just teaching 1 skill at a time, and those application projects, like we talked about, are wrapping everything up, making it more real world for the kids.
For example, we were studying integers, so positive and negative numbers. And so the kids' project at school was to make a timeline of their lives from 11 years before they were born till today. Most of them are 11 years old. And so we incorporated into that social studies as well, because they had to look for world events that had happened within their timeline. And every single one of our fifth graders, no matter where they come from now, can tell you what a negative number is. They can identify them, and they know integers. And then they also got a little bit of history in it as well, and that was our application project for the integer unit. So it was a math skill, but it was taken and put into context for kids, and we're really happy with the results, and I think the kids and the parents in the end were very pleased as well.
I think one more thing just to add is Andy had on one of the benefits, student-teacher relationships. So many of my kids who went into the year, I always give a survey at the beginning of the year. Do you like math? What do you struggle with in math? And you always have, I mean, there's kids that can't stand math. That's just the reality. And I ended my year with every single one of my students being able to tell me that they enjoyed my class, enjoyed learning, enjoyed growing, and they just, like Kelsey said, they love being in our classes and doing the flipped instruction, and just they get that ownership of their learning, and once they have that, it just completely empowers them. So it really was an awesome year, so we're excited for year 2.
The kids they learn that they can do it. I think so many times when you just teach a lesson in class, they go home, 20% of them talking about an achievement gap, they go home and they have no idea what they're doing. Their parents can't help them. And so then you've got 10 to 15% of the kids that are just lost. And with this, they can watch that video 25 times if they need to. They watch them at school, and we can talk more, we can address that more if you're curious about what we do with kids that don't have internet access at home. But even we've worked with kids that don't have internet access at home, that have very little parent support, and they especially love this because they're in control. It's not in the teacher's control, and it's not the parent's control anymore. The kid is in control, and that's very empowering to them.
Let's take a few minutes for board questions about the model and about the implementation. Thank you.
Okay, board members? Questions, reaction? Mark?
So could you talk a little bit about what you do for the kids that don't have internet access?
Sure. So we have, actually, this coming year, we're going to have Chromebooks for all of our fifth graders, so it's going to look very different than it did last year. But last year, each one of us had an iPad in our classrooms, and then we also have a bank of just 6 old iMacs in our hallway. And so the kids that didn't have internet access would come to school, and while we were reviewing the video with the kids that did have internet access, they would go in the hallway with headphones, and they'd watch the video, and they'd submit their answers. So then we could just refresh our computer screens and see how they did. And so those kids, instead of doing the warm-up work, whatever kind of practice we had, say it's like 5 to 10 questions out of their math journals, which is our math curriculum, those kids would then just do that practice work at home, and then they would watch the video at school. The videos are only ideally 5 to 7 minutes long, so those kids would be working about 10 minutes or so at the beginning of class to watch them. And now next year, we're going to have access to some wireless internet pucks that the kids are going to be able to check out at the library, and every one of our kids is going to have a Chromebook. So that will pretty much eliminate that issue altogether.
And Kelsey, you had how many fifth graders, and how many do you think had a hard time with internet access?
I'd say 6 out of 105.
And when we began the cohort, that was one of the initial considerations. And through the work that happened in Stillwater, we had come up with a few different strategies along with that. And so I think I can tell you, we bought, I'll say, 120 to 160 DVDs. This is one of the strategies that was used in Stillwater, is burn the videos to DVD, because most people have a DVD player at the very least, and so you can provide a DVD. We got, I'll say, 40 USB thumb drives. So for some of the computer equipment that we have, we can loan out a computer. We can't provide internet access, but I can give you a computer to take home, and then I can give you a thumb drive, and then you can take that thumb drive and load it on. At Kennedy, they actually, through the replacement or the innovation funds that they were allotted, they purchased iPod Touches specifically for this purpose and then loaded just the YouTube videos, or they weren't YouTube videos, loaded the videos onto the device, checked that out to a student. And so those were some of the ways that we managed to deal with it in this year. Out of all of the teachers that participated, they all, one of my main concerns was if we're moving the instruction in this direction, we don't want to create a situation where we have some kids that are left out because the teachers, frankly, aren't going to consider the work if they can't address all of their students, right? And so it was very much in the forefront of my mind to make sure that that one hurdle was taken care of. I checked in often with it, and it was a non-issue. The teachers solved it, the equipment that we had solved it, the situations were unique enough that in any instance where that was reported an issue in the beginning, it was able to be dealt with. We didn't have anyone that was left out. We had no complaints about being left out of the process.
So many of the kids, when you ask them, do you have wireless internet or do you have internet access, they'll say no, and then you say, well, does mom or dad have a smartphone, or do you have a smartphone? Oh yeah, we have that. Well, do you watch videos on it? Oh yeah. And then they realize, yeah, they really do have internet, and it just doesn't, the more questions we asked of them, we realize it's a very small percentage of our kids.
One of the strengths of the strategy that they have used and that the other teachers in the cohort has used is the videos being on YouTube can be viewed on a smartphone, and then the tool that they're using for assessment, Google Forms, works on a smartphone as well. And so that's another consideration that the teachers used. Essentially, it is a teaching tool, flipping, that the teachers have gravitated toward because they're seeing positive results, and they've helped to troubleshoot any issue that would get in the way of kids being able to experience this instructional technique because it's having results, right? So even in some cases where the teachers at the secondary level were struggling to get kids to watch the videos or not getting as much buy-in as they wanted to in the fall, my belief is because the older the kids are, the more accustomed they are to being lectured, where the younger the kids are, they don't have that experience yet. They just kept coming back at the problem. This is useful. I can get time back. The one other piece that I'll mention with that, just because I thought it was rather exciting, was two of the science teachers at Olson Middle School reported back to me they had a unit that they used to have to cram into a week and a half, and their email to me was, Beaverson, we have 5 weeks for this. We've saved time, so we have 5 weeks to give to this final unit of study. That's fantastic. I mean, that's great.
So how has this changed your workload? Has it made it easier to get through things? I mean, it seems like you got to make videos every so often, so.
You want to talk?
It's a lot of upfront work. So over last summer, we were given 28 hours through the technology, through Andy and Sean. They gave us 28 hours each to start making videos. But I mean, essentially, you're transforming your whole curriculum to videos. So it is a lot of upfront work. And Kelsey mentioned as well, now that class time's completely open, filling that class time also takes a lot of prep. So what are we going to do in class? What projects are we going to do? How do these align with the standards? How are our students going to like these? So I would say that our workload is the same as it was before as far as for us as teachers.
I'm going to piggyback off of Holly. A huge part of this is us being able to do it together. So Holly's big, what Holly's really good at is editing the videos. She's very quick at that, and what I'm good at is finding the projects that align. So we piggyback off each other and we complement each other, and we suggested that to new teachers coming in, trying this. You kind of need a buddy, because being able to have both of us together and having teachers be able to work together. Our classrooms are right next to each other, so we plan everything together anyways. That's helped a lot, and that's helped lessen that workload. Whereas if it was just one of us on our own, I think it would be a lot more difficult.
We were given 20 more hours this summer to continue making videos, and Kelsey and I submitted some PDFs and got about 16 more hours that we're dedicating to flipped instruction this summer too. So we're up to 36 hours of summer writing time to really get prepared for next year.
So do you think, at least in the beginning stages here, you'll go back and tweak some of your videos because you figured something out?
Oh, absolutely.
But,
yeah.
but maybe down the road, they become more static, that you've kind of got them where you want them?
Right.
I'd say the end of the year, March, April, May, our videos, June, our videos, I think are pretty good. The ones that we had at the beginning of the year, September, October, November, December, we're gonna edit and change all of those. That's what we're gonna be working on this summer, so.
Do you think this has more application to math than it would to, say, language arts or, you know, sort of the humanities or social science?
I'm teaching writing next year as well as math, and I've already come up with a bazillion ideas of how I could use flipped instruction for writing, especially the grammar piece. Doing a quick 5-minute video on commas. So I can see how it can fit into writing. I think language arts, I don't know, Kelsey, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I think it looks different, definitely. I think that it's still something that could be done for language arts. In elementary school, we do a lot of guided reading groups where the kids meet in small groups. So instead of having the teacher instruction station where they do more of a book talk, that could be flipped. And then they come in and then the teacher's able to cover 2 stations instead of 1 because one of them's being covered by the flipped video. If they didn't want to make it as homework, we've also found that having the kids watch the videos in class works as well. The kids are more engaged and interested in what they're doing too. So I think it goes cross-curricular, it just looks different than exactly what we're doing.
It's really funny to see the kids pop the headphones on and just get so engaged in the video, because back when we did whole instruction, it was like you would have your 25 kids sitting in front of you, and 3 minutes in, 10 of them would be like, and so it's so different with the video because they're so technologically, that's just how they were born to be. They've grown up with it, and so putting on those headphones and watching a video online is their thing. They love that, so it's kind of cool to see the engagement piece change.
So,
I'll say that in our initial, the initial applications of flipped, science and math seem to be the most obvious, but if you return back to, you don't have to flip the slide, but you could, to Bloom's taxonomy, any of those things that fall into the bottom ones are potentials for flipped opportunities, right? So anything that's low on Bloom's taxonomy is something that has the potential to be flipped. One of the teachers at the secondary level, Deb Dargay, did a lot of work, and she's a world language teacher, and she did a lot of the work making sure that kids were up to speed when they came into class, because she didn't know what their experience was previous to getting to her class at Spanish 4, I believe. And so a lot of the flipped work went to make sure that everyone had the same background and experience with things like vocabulary and conjugating verbs. As a language arts teacher, we joke around that we've always been flipping, right? Like we send the book home and you read the book and then we come back and we discuss it. So we feel as though we invented flipped. Math just made it look cool.
I'll just piggyback too that there's a lot of different ways, and two art teachers for elementary will be flipping next year. And the whole idea, if you think about art, is you want kids to be applying. You want them to be working in a lab situation. So having resource videos is going to be a great way that they're going to be using that instruction.
So does this change what skill sets are most important to a teacher? I mean, just listening to you describe it, it sounded like, wow, there's a whole lot of coordination and management that has to go on now in that classroom, because, I mean, that's a good thing, but it sounds like it's a little bit, maybe different skill sets in play.
I think one of the reasons why Flipped has continued to grow in the way that it has is if you listen to the things that they're talking about doing, differentiation, small group work, all of those pieces are things that we have as educators been trained to do, but did not have the instructional time within the class to get to do. So really what you're seeing more is the benefit of those positive things that we've wanted to do for so long, but you had to figure out how do you, if the time is finite, how do you get there? So this is a fantastic example of how technology, when applied, can do something that adds efficiency and then get out of the way of great teaching. I had the opportunity to go in and observe their class twice. They'll say it was only twice, and so they had their best foot on, but they didn't really know I was coming either time. And you notice immediately in the situation where this is working is that the classroom teacher has already had the class set up for success, right? Like the kids can do this thing because of the way that the class was set up previous to the technology being introduced. So there are things, but we try to help out and support that. Video editors.
I want to say thanks for coming and really explaining, how it works, because that's really beneficial to us, I think, so appreciate that.
I have a couple of questions, if I can jump in here. I'd like to echo Mark's sentiment. Thank you for coming, Andy, Holly, Kelsey, Sean, and of course, David. Two different questions. What types of questions, if any, are you getting from teachers throughout the district that aren't involved in this? Are they picking your brain? Are they saying, I'm glad you're doing it, I don't have to? I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but I'll let you answer that, and I'll get to the next one.
I had a good question. One teacher asked me, and I couldn't believe she asked this. She said, so what do you do all day? And I, of course, went into, I said, come on in, come and check it out, and she understands now. And I'd say we explain to people it's more of a facilitator role, and like Sean said, teachers come out of college, and not too long ago for the two of us, with this grand idea of what education is like and what you're going to do all these things for the kids, and then you get loaded with everything that's all the practical things. And the flipped instruction really helps us manage those practical things so that we have the time to make the meaningful units, to do the stuff that we love to do, the actual, the art form of teaching versus just the regurgitation of the kids, of just spitting out facts. And so that's the way that we've explained it to a lot of teachers that have asked. More people, we've got 2 more teachers in our building next year, 2 4th grade teachers that are jumping on board. 3 4th grade teachers that are jumping on board. And they really are interested in what we've done, so they want to replicate. We're helping quite a few people make their videos and get started. And Holly and I both started just testing it out, testing the waters. We didn't completely flipped from the get-go. We just had videos at home for the kids to use as resources. So we're suggesting that to teachers, that they pick maybe the 4 or 5 most difficult units or lessons that they have throughout the school year, and make videos on those for the kids and the parents to use at home, and then go from there and start slowly. So
I think the fact too that Andy has 17 more teachers next year shows that people are interested in it. And I think Kelsey and I made a video, when was that, middle of the year maybe, of just our flipped journey and kind of what we'd been through, and Andy and Sean showed that video to a lot of people. So
we found out later.
Yeah. So I was getting emails from teachers in other elementary schools saying, wow, great work, I want to know more, tell me more. So I think it's gotten a really good response, and just the fact that there's 17 more people on board from 3 this past year shows you people are interested.
Teachers from all over the country. Holly got a couple emails from teachers wanting our videos that are way far away, and have to explain to them via email that's not how this works, but
The cohort from the secondary is continuing, and then we have another cohort started this year, and so that group will about double also, approximately.
Okay, the second part of this particular question, we'll look at the students. Are you getting any critique from your students saying, I don't think so, I don't like this, I don't like that, anything where you should try this would be cool, or it doesn't work when I use my device upside down, backwards, or?
They really there was one time I said to Holly, I said, let's just throw something in there to make sure that they're really paying attention. So end of the winter, we had them draw a snowman on their paper with a smiley face and his hat. And then
Halfway through the video, Kelsey said, okay, stop and draw a snowman at the top of your paper.
Yeah. And so then we gave a little reward to the kids the next day that had done that. They loved it. And they said, why can't you do that all the time? So we were getting feedback, and we have one of our other colleagues will chime into videos. He's a man, so he'll chime in with a really deep voice. And kind of just lighten it up a little bit, and the kids have told us they really like that. There was a couple times we had kids that weren't able to watch the video at home for some reason. Their internet access had cut out, and so we just made that very seamless and said, no problem, use part of your work time today to catch up. We didn't penalize them for that. And so they went back the next day and were able to access a different video. Sometimes there's just technology flukes. But that's pretty much the only thing that I've heard.
We made it, as part of that video, we had our kids give some feedback to insert into the video for people to hear what our students thought. And so I said to my class, who would like to say how they feel about flipped instruction in this video? And every single hand went up. And they all wanted to share why flipped instruction is so great. And some of the things that they said was, you don't have to listen to the teacher talk anymore in the front of the classroom. And I get to pick what I want to do during class, and I get to learn at my own speed. So they see the benefits, like what we see, they're seeing it, and they can put it into words, so it's pretty cool.
At the secondary levels, some of the teachers received higher levels of complaints about flipping. The kids had a harder time getting their mind around it. And so the strategy that Megan Alberg used was she unflipped for a unit. So she said, fine, we'll unflip. You're not watching the videos, we're not going to do flipped. By the end of that unit, they were all like, can we go back to the way you were doing it at the beginning of the year? And so, so that was the one complaint that we had there that I was told about.
Yeah, one day I had to go back and do a whole group instruction because we weren't able to get the video done in time. So Kelsey and I were just like, okay, we'll go back, we'll do a direct instruction lesson. The kids were just like baffled. They couldn't believe it. They were just like, this is awful.
They were angry at us.
Yes.
So, well, what did you do this morning when we were at specials? We had a meeting.
What were you doing last night? Why couldn't you make the video?
Happy with us.
So.
So how are they going to readjust then next year?
It's a good question.
Going into 6th grade, you're talking about? Yes. Yeah. I think some of the 6th grade teachers are on board and they are flipping. And so, but I don't know.
Yeah, so this is year one, and the way that this particular cohort worked was we offered it to those who were interested. So we had a group join with year one, and then we saw exciting results, and so the cohort expanded. And so, more teachers are doing it. It's growing at a rate of adoption. And so for next year, will they get all of their teachers have significant flipped portions? No, but is there a good chance that 1 or 2 of them will? Yes. Will that increase in the year following that? Likely, if it continues to work in this way where people are getting time back and they're having positive results in doing that. And so you can imagine that as this grows and becomes normalized in our systems, kids will experience less and less pockets where they're not getting that type of instruction. One of the things that I'll say is that they jumped in and flipped everything, and the message for our teachers has been, you're not expected to flip everything, right? Like you get to decide based on your instruction and your professional judgment, those high value things that you would flip. And so not even every teacher is going to, even if they're part of the cohort, flip every single lesson. They're gonna find the ones that make the most amount of sense to flip and then do that. But it'll be a change in instructional practice that gets them to reflect on those lessons that I think is exciting also.
I think that, I just think about our school, Normandale Hills, and all the amazing teachers we have at our school that aren't flipping, and those kids are still learning. And our 4th grade teachers who didn't flip this year had insane growth on their MAP scores. So I don't think that we need flipped to help our kids grow. I just think there's a lot of benefits to it, and if people want to try it, that'd be awesome if we could keep growing it. So
it's important for you to know too, our 5th graders did not everything was flipped. We had 2 colleagues that did not flip, and our 5th graders see all 4 of us teachers, so they had both.
Only math was flipped, not language arts and the other subjects.
And I'll follow up on these students to see how they do academically the next year. Other questions from the board?
Yes, Nelly.
Yeah, well, so I have to agree that students want to own the lesson, definitely. But it looks like then you use the video every single day, right? For how long do you use the same video?
We try to do a different skill every night. So the video is just very basic, just that knowledge on blooms, just very, very basic with 4 basic questions. We're not trying to get crazy with the scale, just can you do it and show us in these 4 questions. So it's very basic.
Mhm. Now, when you have kids then that don't have internet access and then they come the following day and then they do it while the other ones already have enough practice time or enough time to watch it over and over again, what do you do to keep them level if you have 2 different groups in the morning, groups of kids?
We have, out of a class of 26, I'd say I have 26 different groups. Every single kid is doing something different at pretty much the entire class period. So the kids that come in our case, and this is going to transform now as more and more kids are getting access to technology, but for those, group of kids, maybe 3 to 5 of them, that weren't able to watch it at home, and sometimes it's because they had to go to grandma's house for dinner. Sometimes it's because they had a hockey game. Sometimes it varies, the degrees of why they didn't watch it. Those kids use their class time, the 10 minutes, to watch those videos, and then they take whatever that they start to work on in class and they bring that home. So they're not missing anything, it's just shifted. It's kind of flipping the flip, if you will, back again.
And I don't think that that's ideal. That's why Kelsey and I were really excited to hear that we would get 1-to-1 Chromebooks next year. I think that if the kids can watch it at home, that's the best bet. We did find some of our kids who don't have internet home would take their recess and watch the videos or do it before school just because they didn't. Yeah, it's just by choice because they didn't want to miss out on anything in class.
We have breaks built in because our math blocks are 70 minutes. We have breaks built in there as well where we let the kids use resources such as extra math, which is like a math fact practice, different games that strategy games that they can play. And so the kids can watch the videos then as well. I prefer personally that they watch them at the beginning of class because then I can answer their questions in class instead of having them wait. In fact, any kids that come into our classrooms, a lot of them will ask, well, can I just watch it at home tonight? I didn't get to do it last night. I say, no, you're doing it right now. Because I don't want them behind. I don't want them missing anything. But in the grand scheme of things, them taking 10 minutes to watch the video doesn't take away from their learning at all, I don't think.
And how do you, what is the, okay, before that. So you say that they work in groups. So when they're working in groups and they're doing practice during the class, do they get to interact with each other?
Mm-hmm.
They do.
Yep.
Okay.
They can choose to work with a partner on a project or in a group of 3. It just depends on what the teacher wants to do. Sometimes I have them come in and do get into groups of 2 to do 10 practice problems based on the project or based on the concept from the night before. So, yep, there's a lot of interaction and collaboration. And I think that's part of the higher blooms is getting them to work together, talk about what they're learning, and apply that knowledge. So, yeah, they work together a lot.
And to vary from activity to activity, how many kids are in a group, which kids are in a group. The groups are not stagnant. We don't pick them and say, all of you understood this, so you're all in this group, and all of you didn't understand this, so you're in this group. That doesn't work like that. It's very flexible, changes from day to day, and that's one of the beautiful things about having those Google Forms and having the kid having that information before they walk in, because I can literally pick up my computer as the kids are coming in and look and just assign groups, and there's even things we can use with technology that'll pick partners for us. I don't need to do the popsicle sticks like I used to anymore. And so those are very flexible.
At the end of the unit, how do you evaluate, and do you see a big difference when in reaching goals from the kids who got enough practice at home and those who didn't?
Have they seen?
Maybe we'll get into that with the data.
Mm-hmm.
We evaluate with exit slips, which are just informal formative assessments, a couple times a week. And so we can see, just in case older brother or sister's helping them at home with their homework, we can see then in class if they understood. It's like a quiz, sort of. We don't call it that, but it's basically a formative assessment that just helps us see who understood what. And with the exit slips, it's nice too because we actually see their work. That's one of the things on the Google Forms. We want to make them quick and easy for the kids, so oftentimes we just have them enter in the answer. Especially with math, it's hard for the kids to enter in different characters and things. So the exit slips, we can see what they've actually done, so we can pinpoint the errors. And I would say most of our kids, I shouldn't say all, not 100%, but just about every single one of our kids grew more than their expected growth for the year, including the kids that didn't have access to internet at home. So.
Yes, Mark.
Just, so, you know, we're going to talk about the referendum here after we're done talking to you, and of course, part of that is to, you know, move to one-to-one computing.
Yay!
So middle school and high school, and then down into the, you know, probably, I don't know, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade at least, right? So my question is, do you think as classrooms have those devices available to them that teachers will willingly embrace this as an instructional method, or will it, what I'm trying to understand is, will the technology free them up, you know, give them more options that they'll be grateful for, or is there a possibility that they'll feel pressure by having that device? Now I've got to make good use of it, and therefore I'm going to have to do something that I might not want to do.
My fiance teaches in Burnsville, and they were given smart boards, but no training. And that's exactly what happened. And I think that with this one-to-one, if we give the teachers the training and the time, training and time are the biggest two things. If we give the teachers the tools, the training, and the time, they'll be able to take off with it. The biggie is if we just hand every teacher, here's your classroom set of devices, do what you need to do, then yes. I think that most of the time they're going to get, some teachers will take advantage of it and take their own time to make it work. But if the teachers are given the time and the training to go along with those tools, then that's what we were given. We were given training, and we were given time, and we were given the tools, and that's why we were able to make this work. So I think it takes all three of those.
I'll just mention, you've heard them say they're excited because they will be being teaching in a one-to-one Chromebook situation next year. That's because their principal, and with the support of their PTA and some of their technology innovation funding, have decided that they want to go ahead and pilot that with their 5th grade. So again, you can see, you know, the principal and the teachers felt they were in a place where one-to-one was going to be beneficial to student learning. So they are really going to help us as we move forward with the elementary. How is that going to look? How is that going to work? And we're really going to learn a lot from Normandale Hills, the 5th grade team, for next year.
And with that, we're getting time and training along with those. And our colleagues that didn't flip this year, that are nervous about it, are given additional time and additional training to help.
And most of them, you ask, have you used digital resources before? Do you supplement with websites and other digital resources? And they're like, yes. And we're like, yes, that's the first step of using Chromebooks is doing what you've already done. You're just not going to have to sign the computer lab out or try to, you know, get time to go down, or during testing time not be able to go. So really, that's the first step, is continuing the good work they're already doing. You know, flipping, we're using the tools, Google Apps for education. We're using Moodle. We're using a lot of the tools that all teachers currently have access to too. So continuing that work too is part of the plan.
If there aren't any more questions about the implementation, this is about the most exciting board meeting I've ever been to. I won't take too much time with the data, but I thought you'd want to see the very positive results of all of these efforts. And basically, I designed a quick study to match all of the students that were in the 5th grade classes. And you guys taught all the 5th grade students at Normandale, so it was a fairly large group of students, which is ideal for doing a study like this. And not only to match them on their 4th grade math scores on the map, but also to match on the basis of free and reduced price lunch English language learner status, special ed status, gender. Sometimes girls learn a little faster than boys. And then to find out how much growth was made by the matched sample group of students in comparison to the folks that got the flipped instruction. And so I won't go through the nitty-gritties too much. You can read about the matching criteria. It's basically sorting the file with a hierarchy of variables that are most related to student achievement in math, and then making sure you get perfect matches on those variables that are most related to math, and try to get the best matches you possibly can. Actually, gender isn't a big factor, so if I had to trade off, I would match on everything else and have a girl and boy match, and then try to balance it off later. But basically, the computer does all of the work, and if I get ties, if I get all 6 variables matched, then I use the birth date, the one closest to the match, then, or to the student would be used for the match sample. So this is called quasi-experimental design. It qualifies for, federal funding type programs. It's where you can't randomly assign. So we didn't randomly assign flipped instruction to these 2 teachers or randomly assign the students to the teachers. We couldn't do that, and it's really practical. But using this kind of design, if you control for the important variables, then if there are any differences in achievement rate, it's due to the instruction. And so that's what's exciting about this type of analysis. And turned out that I had 73 pairs of students that were identically matched, and then 9 pairs of students that I had 5 out of the 6 variables matched. So it's an excellent kind of matching study that we could even submit to the What Works Clearinghouse because it meets their standards. There were 5 students that I couldn't match at all. They just had very unique characteristics, so those students were left out of the analysis. And so you can see it just turned out that we had identical matches on race. We had the same free and reduced lunch, English language learners. 15% of the students were special ed students, and 46% of the students were boys. And so these subgroups are small enough, so I haven't done a lot of subgroup analysis yet. Just wanted to get the total results out. But I can look at free and reduced lunch and see if the free and reduced lunch. My preliminary look at that is that free and reduced lunch students may have gained a little bit more than the non-free reduced lunch. It may not be statistically significant, but it isn't the case that the students who made the great gains were all white middle-class students, for example. So here's the graph that, the yellow doesn't show up very well on this screen, but the yellow would be the matched sample. So identically matched on the pretest and the demographics, those students gained 7.7 scale score points on the MAP test. And then the students that got the flipped instruction gained 11.7 units of growth. And that was highly statistically significant. I also put in a blue line, which is the national norm. So typically, students from 4th to 5th that have these type of pre-test scores on average would gain 5 points. And so the flipped instruction actually more than doubled that gain that the typical national norm students would make. And then for those that care about standard deviations and stuff, you use the standard deviation or the variance in scores to see if these results could be found by chance. And it turned out the most important number on this slide is at the bottom on the far right where it says SIG. That's the significance level of the finding. And if that is less than 0.05, it's considered statistically significant. Well, this is 0.002, which means that you would find a result like this by chance 2 out of 1,000 times if you did this experiment over again. So, so this is quite impressive results. It is a small group, but using the best available statistical techniques, it does look like there's a causal relationship between flipped instruction and mathematics outcomes for Normandale-type students, let's say. And both groups, the control group and the treatment group, made more growth than the national norm. And the caveats are, yes, these teachers weren't randomly assigned. We could have picked the 2 best math teachers in the whole district. And so I actually went back and looked at the math results for previous years, and this was the strongest math results that we've seen in 3 years. I think you'd attest to that from the MAP results. So I think these are excellent teachers. And I really like what Sean said about, everything was in place at the beginning. So I think there are some prerequisites like, classroom management techniques, using data to make decisions that you were probably using before you got into flipped. What will be interesting is, as a team, if we can identify what are those kind of prerequisites, and then come up with a list of what does it really mean to be fully implemented as a flipped classroom, and then see if we get people to meet those criteria, see if we can replicate these results. Because if you only implement half the program, you usually don't get the same kind of results. But if you do exactly the same program, and we can teach other teachers to do what was done in this case, then we've got something that could be scalable. And I think it'll be really exciting to analyze the results from the 17 new elementary classrooms. I'd like to see if there are any secondary classrooms fully implementing that we could also do some analysis with. And it's just my pleasure and privilege to be working with such fine professionals here. It really is fun to get these kinds of results. So I'll take any questions on the analysis if you have any.
Chair,
Yes, Marie?
I just want to say congratulations. That's super.
Thank you.
It's so exciting. You guys should be so proud.
Thank you.
Yeah, it really is, and congratulations, Dave. I think that's a terrific example of the kind of accountability that the board is looking forward to going forward as we're discussing just all the implications of purchasing new equipment and changing our instructional techniques. And the question remains, what other than standardized test scores or measurement of gain might we be looking for in terms of 21st century learning skills that students are learning, and how we value those and how we evaluate those as well. But this is great, and it's very informative for me, and I hope that we can find some ways as well to interpret this for our public as we are explaining the benefits of the direction that we're moving, that we can give these kind of vivid examples as well as some statistical reasons that there might be some increased confidence in our community that we're headed in the right direction as we're making some significant changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions? There we go. Well, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda. I appreciate all the time you took to be here tonight and to inform us and make us better learners here and better teachers of what it is we're up to as a board and as a district. And I appreciate Rick Kaufman wanting to speak to us tonight, making arrangements to be on the agenda. It was not on what was originally shared with you, but we added his presentation, and we are going to discuss further the board role in referendum planning and information giving. And so Rick Kaufman, and many of us are going to see you tomorrow also as you're sharing professionally with others in the education community tomorrow at a workshop that will be providing more information on referendum planning. So Rick Kaufman, please.
Thank you, Chair Culver, Superintendent Fujitaki, members of the board. It's my pleasure to be here to talk a little bit about the referendum, and just so that we remain legal, this is not an advocacy. This is really information about looking at the 2007 referendum and sort of the challenge before us. And so I thought I'd start with some good news. You all recall the community survey that was conducted last fall. The results really put us for Bloomington schools, over all the surveys that have been done by Decision Resources, in a really good position with our community. In fact, in most cases, the results of the survey were the highest, not only that we've experienced here at the district since community surveys have been conducted periodically, but on average every 5 years. In many cases, they were either the highest or among the top 3 in the metro area with respect to comparisons. So the 2012 Community Survey Decision Resources, you recall, it was a 400 random sampling with an additional what we call balloon of 150 parent sample or 150 facility family homes to give us a total of 550 random sampling survey, allowed us to be able to do some disaggregation among our parents. As you can see by the results on the screen, there were no poor ratings on any school level. In fact, it was a 7-to-1 favorable to unfavorable ratio in almost all of the data that we saw. Among the performance ratings, the 4 up on the screen you see were the highest, or either the highest in the metro or among the top 3, including teachers. The school board had the highest rating ever of all the surveys that Bloomington Public Schools has conducted. The norm is around 50%, so a 20% jump for the school board rating, and you see the principals and the administration and superintendent. Quality of education continues to remain among the top identified by all residents. And you see the increase from 2007. And again, because technology, there were a number of questions as John developed a technology plan. 90% of our community residents and parents believe that it was very important education, and 81% indicated a current use in the schools is excellent or good. When it comes to spending money wisely and taxes based on previous referendums, you see an 18% increase over 2007 in how we spend our money is seen as efficiently and effectively, and that we're good stewards of our money at a 10-to-1 favorable to unfavorable ratio, nearly 10-to-1 ratio is that highest in the metro area. So that's the good news. So going into the campaign, the referendum this fall, we're sitting in a pretty good position with respect to our community. That does not make our challenge any easier. It just puts us in a position to build on that goodwill within our community. So any key to a successful referendum plan is one that has good, effective two-way communication with staff and our key stakeholders. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But in reality, what it is to get staff on board. We know that parents will talk to staff about the campaign or about the referendum, what's needed, and it's important that we, not on school time, but it's important that we have staff and community members that are supportive of it. Keeping controversy to a minimum. Our job is ultimately working with the Citizens Committee is to know who our voters are and to get those voters to the polls. Winning depends on getting those yes voters to the polls and whether you can get the potential yes voters to the polls. In almost every election, yes voters must be identified and encouraged to vote. That is why there are groups, the Citizens Committee will expend a lot of effort and use of volunteers to not only identify yes voters, but then encourage them to vote, to motivate the yes voters to vote. If a person identifies as a no voter, they really are no voter. Highly unlikely you will change a person's no, early indication is a no vote to a yes vote. Most undecided voters are really no voters if they indicate more than once that they're undecided. If a person is undecided because they have not received information or don't have enough information to make a decision, that is an individual that can be swayed in most cases. And again, it's important that we don't make any assumptions as to who the yes or no voters. Let's look at 2007 results. Specifically, if you look in the green area, we had, as you know, a two-question referendum. On the screen, what you see is the red were the precincts in the 4 wards across the community that voted no, more no votes than yes votes. While we carried both questions, they were both slim margin wins. It's important to note as we look at and do our research as to the likely turnout, and I'll show you that chart in a few minutes here, we go back as far as 2003 and 2007. In 2001, it was shortly after 9/11, and there weren't a whole lot of school districts that passed anything in 2001. Going further back in 2000, 1999, and 1995, the community had a lot more people in and a lot more voters. So you cannot, with a whole lot of certainty, look at those as trending to determine how many people will vote, because we have fewer people are voting in Bloomington. So we look at 2003 and we look at 2007 to help identify by precinct and then overall the percentage of people that will likely vote in any referendum. We further look at the results from 2007. You see that we broke down by each precinct, and I've got up there by the wards, the actual yes votes, the no votes, the difference, and what we had in terms of those that we identified to be our yes voters. And so you'll see that in many cases we were fairly close, in some cases a little over, some cases a little under. And then the most important column here really is the voter percentage turnout. We had on average across the district 32% of our voters that voted in 2007, the registered voters. That's not unusual for an off-election year. 2013 is very similar to 2007. It's an off-election year. As you know, there'll be 4 city seats and 4 school board seats on the ballot other than the referendum. Mr. Ablin.
No, I just would say, I think there'll be 5 city seats up.
5, thank you. I'm thinking of the 4 that are not, the incumbents are not running again.
1 at large.
1 at large, correct. But also if you look at the screen, and I'll pop these 2 up here, what the areas that we typically lose are our east side, Ward 4, all of the precincts in Ward 4, and just over half of the precincts in the first ward, which is the east, south, central, really where the district office is and south. Okay, Wards 2 and 3 are really central to west, but you'll see there are some precincts in those areas that we also lose. Okay. So I've already identified when we look at the data, some of some of you that are attending tomorrow will see this. This is the referendum organizational model that we followed in 2007. Most school districts follow this very, very similar type of model where you have a citizens referendum team that consists of these kinds of committees, and then this shows you really high level what those committee tasks fall under there. There are some slight variations to those committees depending on the type of campaign, a referendum, how it's run, and things of that nature. Some of those committees obviously need more volunteers than others. There are 2 types of campaign. There's the informational and the advocacy. The district is allowed to do informational campaigns. District-driven is focused on schools, departments, and staff providing information to our electorate. Advocacy, which is getting out the vote, the GOTVs get out the vote, identifying yes voters and get out the vote, is really focused on those targeted efforts, okay, to identify your yes voters and then get them to vote. This is what that referendum plan looks like based on strategy and the various different action plans, and I think some of this presentation was given to you in your materials and just gives you some background in terms of the referendum plan. So let's talk about our votes needed to win. Again, this is based on analysis that we do. We've done in 2007, and I've done in other campaigns to help identify what it is we need to focus on. Currently, we have a little over 54,000 registered voters in Bloomington. This is up from 2007. We believe, based on historical data, that the percent of total voters expected to vote is going to be around 32%. So if you multiply line 1 and 2, the number that will likely vote is going to be a little over 17,000 voters that'll go to the polls. Bloomington does very well in terms of turning out people to vote. On a presidential election year, it's sometimes closer to 70, 75%. A great turnout for a community of this size. But in off-election years, it's typically around 28 to 32%, somewhere around in there. So the percent of yes voters needed to win is that 17,309 times 50% plus 201, plus 202. And the reason I put that up there, it's really 50% plus 1, but you add 201 to avoid an auto recount. If you recall, in 2007, both the operational and the technology levy were just over the threshold of the 201 to automatic recount. But they were both successful and over that. Now, in the development of a referendum campaign, to really assure yourself success, is you build a multiplication of 135% and 150% of the actual number of voters needed to win. And you see up there it's anywhere between about 12,000 and a little over 13,000 voters. Typically, when school districts identify their yes voters, if you fall within that nearly 12,000 and 13,000, you're pretty much assured a win because you're well over the number of people that will typically turn out to vote. Okay, it's a benchmark, but it's something that I've never seen a school district that actually has reached that 135 to 150%. Looking at 2007, you'll see that the registered voters, 53,686, we projected 28% turnout. If you remember, Mr. Culver, you were working very hard that day to go to various different precincts to give us some voter counts. And about midday is when we realized our voter turnout was going to be much larger than 28%. So you see the projected and the actual. We projected we needed a little over 7,700 votes to carry this. And this is looking at the technology levy. And what turned out, the actual was about 1,000 more people turned out of the yes votes. You look at the bottom and particularly focus on question 2, which is the closest approximation to our capital project levy. 8,600 yes votes, 84, just under 8,500 no votes. Okay, so it's very close. But had we projected 32%, we would have been very close to being in the ballpark for where we needed to be. So let's look at 2007 versus 2013. You look in 2007, the actual registered voters compared to now, as I noted, is about 500, a little over 400 voters have increased. And by the way, I've broken this down, you don't have it here, but I have broken it down by precincts. And some of those precincts where we have lost, there are more voters. But across the district, there's some growth and some decrease. There's been a slight variation with the census. In working with the city clerk's office, there was some slight movements in a couple precincts, but not a great change that we can expect. You see the number that will likely vote, a couple hundred more will likely vote, thereby needing a little over what we project to be 8,800 votes, so nearly to carry this. And you see that when we build in those other factors, what we need to win. Okay? So when we talk about get out the vote, this week we will be launching the district website, which will be information only. It will direct those folks to the website to a technology page, a safety and security page, the 2 forerunners of the referendum. It will also have a finance information on there, and what's probably the most popular is frequently asked questions, as well as an email that citizens can send questions to. That'll everyone that sends an email question to, we will respond to, but it may make also the frequently asked questions. The community, the Citizens Committee will be working on community meetings and mailings, targeting messages, making personal contact. Sometimes there's door-to-door canvassing. And the last bullet point is what I want to draw your attention to. Absentee voting begins on September 20th and ends on November 4th, the Monday at 4 p.m. prior to Tuesday, November 5th, Election Day. It is often overlooked, and in Bloomington, we can expect anywhere between 10 and 15% of absentee voters to cast their ballots well before the election day. When I spoke with Janet Lewis, the city clerk, many of those absentee voters will have cast their ballots. There's an early rush, and then there's a late rush, mid to late October. So it puts a challenge not only on the Citizens Committee, but the district to make sure we get adequate information out to the community. Okay. Talk about phone bank. It's a tried and true strategy that works in most school districts that have referendums. It's the most efficient way to reach voters with targeted messages. It is labor intensive. For you board members that were here in 07, you recall that there was a lot of work. But it does motivate volunteers because they are engaging voters, and obviously preferably yes voters. So what most school districts, including Bloomington in 07, will do is they will make initial calls to the registered voters to determine where they are with respect to the referendum. Those residents that indicate no will be removed from any list, and those that indicate undecided, I need more information, will move on to another list, and of course those yes voters, and then efforts to get out the vote activities take place. okay? And we don't allow that work, the Citizens Committee won't allow that work to be done at home. Just doesn't get done. Here are our do's and don'ts. Thank you to the Home and Law Office for providing this information back in 2007. As school board members, you can join the Yes Committee, okay? You can work on the Yes Committee. You and the superintendent and the staff can give promotional, can be part of promotional effort, what we call advocacy, presentations and conversations and meetings on our own time, okay? Not during the workday. School board and staff can provide information and correct misinformation also. That can be done during the workday. As long as we're providing information, we're not advocating for a vote for or against, we can do that work. You as school board members and staff can display vote yes signs and bumper stickers, vote yes signs in your house, in your personal property, and bumper stickers, but not on non-school property, so your home and your car. What you can't do and what we can't do. We can't put vote yes or no signs on school property or wear vote yes or no buttons to school. We cannot use any district equipment, copiers and computers, email, or any other supplies to advocate for or against the referendum. We often get complaints. We got this in 2007. It's pretty frequent, a pretty commonplace to get complaints from citizens, particularly those that are opposed and those parents that are opposed, that we're trying to influence students to vote a certain way. Staff, they are not allowed to do that. They are okay to encourage students to exercise their right to vote. They just cannot try to influence them to vote in any certain way. In addition, we don't force or coerce staff to be involved in the campaign. It is completely voluntary for any advocacy efforts that staff want to be involved in. As part of your packets, and we have shared with our leadership team to also share with staff, additional guidelines and frequently asked questions with respect to what you can and can't do are handouts that you've received. And again, those came from Home and Law offices. That's all I have, and with respect to the referendum, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
School board question. Dick, saw your hand up first.
Just one quick one. I think maybe, David, this is for you. This is on the do's and don'ts. It says school board and staff can provide information and correct misinformation. Would that be in response to a direct question? I'm shopping somewhere and someone says, hey, did you hear this? And we can't do that. Or we can correct the information, or if we have that conversation in a parking lot, which.
That's your free time.
In your example, you can do whatever you want in that case. You could advocate if you wanted to.
That's free time.
Just want to make sure.
Okay, Lyle.
Just in statewide referendums, like the gay issue thing that was last, a non-voter was considered a no. Is a non-voter on a local school board referendum considered a no?
Explain more. What do you mean by non-voter?
Well, one of the key issues at the state level, we had two issues. What were they? You had a voter ID,
Voter ID.
and the gay marriage issue were at the statewide level. And I think the state law says if you go to the polls and you vote for a state representative or a senator, but you choose not to vote in these ballot issues, that's considered a no vote. Is that same thing true at a school board referendum?
No. A person not marking the ballot is not neither a yes or a no.
Neither yes or no.
Good. Thanks for clarifying. Good question too.
And then your districts 2 and 3, if I recall right, are they the bottom tier districts, wards in our map of Bloomington? Isn't it 1 up in the northeast, 2, 3, and 4?
I think it is.
I think so.
Yes.
Right, so it's the bottom 2 or 3 are favorable, and the top 1 and 4 are not so.
I think it goes clockwise. It goes 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, so 2 and 3 are on the bottom, right. And finally, the last question, if a social studies teacher wants to have a debate in his or her classroom about this referendum, they would bring in you to be an advocate and somebody that is opposed to the referendum. They can do that, right? As long as they allow both positions to be exposed to the students.
Correct. They can't have me, but they certainly can have a parent.
Why not you?
because I can't on my time, unless I take vacation time,
Oh.
can I be involved in the debate? Because I cannot advocate during my normal workday, correct,
Okay.
Mr. Holman?
Correct. But we could,
Yes, you
because
can.
we're private citizens.
That's right.
Yes, you could.
Mhm.
You mean board members, is that what you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Do we have an idea yet who's going to chair or co-chair our Citizens Committee?
I'm not aware of any specific. I do know there are efforts in the community underway, citizens that are making contact with others to gauge the interest level of some folks that might be interested in leading not only the campaign, but others just to be involved in the various different committee work, things like that. I will say that it's a pretty concerted effort right now because it's wise to get those committees going, or at least identified, and the work really gets started mid-July, and it just kind of ramps up. And one of the things we shared with the leadership team, particularly the principals, when I kind of parachuted in 2007, I took over kind of the research side, the good out the vote piece. And one of the things that I noticed in mid to late October is a fatigue factor among staff. I didn't know a whole lot of people, but that was something I started to see among committee work and among staff and others and citizens. And that was because while it was a small group, but it was a very dedicated and hardworking group. But for a district this size, for a campaign, particularly a two-question referendum, it was tiring. And so the more people you can get involved, the greater the share of the workload, and does not fall to a small group of people. So referendum campaigns I've worked on, I really strongly encourage you start off with a very big group of folks and kind of gradually jump into it and build steam, because every referendum campaign, every election for that matter, there's a drop-off. And one of the things I should mention is in 2007, when we did a lot of analysis of why those votes were so close. And there were what I would call two primary factors. And the one primary factor is we had a lot of yes voters. We certainly had enough yes voters identified to carry, as we did, to carry it in 2007. But what happened is we had some cases parents just didn't vote. They thought we were in good position and didn't need to vote. We also believe that there were two parent households where one parent voted, the other didn't, thinking again that this was a sort of a slam dunk. There is no referendum election that's a slam dunk. Even one like this, where you have strong community support going into, the fact that it's a no tax increase, those are all bode well, but it's still a lot of work. So the second primary factor, I think, is that people are reading their tea leaves. People typically vote with their checkbook, and in 2007, we were at the brink of an economic downturn, and I think people were seeing that. We're starting to see layoff notices and the like. So getting out the vote, that's why it's so critical.
I'm just curious, where did that 201 come from on slide number 9? Is there a percentage that you use there, like 0.5% or something to that effect?
No, it's the recount.
The recount.
Oh, that's that's a state. That's to avoid the recount. If it's 201 votes or less, the difference is you have to have an automatic recount.
A firm, a finite figure, I mean, a concrete figure, 201. It's not a percentage.
Yep.
No matter how many votes were cast?
I'm thinking
So
it's
you could have
0.5% myself.
This is for this kind of an election. I think there's a difference with the governor and things like that, where it's a percentage.
If it's under 201, there'd have to be a recount?
Automatic recount.
Well, then let's go to,
Although we'd still win that,
let's
presumably.
go to that one that had all the totals on it. Let's see what it said. It was 145. I looked at it as you gave it. I said, wow. Number 10, slide 10 out of 14. The difference on question 2, the technology one, was 145. At the very bottom down there. So I don't think it's a firm 201.
It is a firm, but the fact that it's under 200 doesn't mean that vote totals are going to change after a recount.
But was there a recount?
There must have been.
Must have been, huh? And who picks up that cost? Do we, the board, or the city, or?
Well, we get assessed for the election costs, our share.
Do you have any recollection back of 207, was, like this year, we're gonna have 5 city council seats up for election. In 207, was it 3? Like usually it's either the top 2 or the bottom 2 plus 1 at large?
I don't know what the city was. I know we had school board election. We had four school board members up then, right? I think Mr. Sorum, Mr. Walter, I think Director Bush, you were up in 2007 too.
And
We
how
had at
many-
least 3.
How many
No,
candidates
she's on
were
our
there?
No,
cycle.
it wasn't.
No.
Would have been Marine.
Remember you?
I was on with Jim and, I was on that cycle with Jim and
Mhm.
talked to me.
So it's 3 in 07, okay.
I'm thinking that because there are 5 city council seats up, the voter turnout will be higher than norm.
It's a guess, but the history doesn't reflect that on an off-election year like '07. Same as if you look at '03, there was a slightly higher turnout, but a little over 18,000 total votes cast in '03, and there were 17,000 in '07, so not much difference.
Just offhand, do you know how many of these 54,000 registered voters have children in the school district, in the schools?
Well, we don't right now, we will have that count at some point, but if it reflects the community makeup, it's 70%, 71% citizens without school-age children, so 29%, 25 to 29%, somewhere on there. We'll have that figure at some point.
Anything further? All right, thank you, Rick. Appreciate
Thank you.
giving that information today. We're at the conclusion of our prepared agenda. Is there anything further for the good of the day?
I have one thing.
Mark, please.
Just a reminder for anyone that might be watching that Nelly and I are hosting a meeting here tomorrow at 7 o'clock for anybody who's interested in running for school board. We'll talk about procedures for filing and some of those kinds of things. So if you're interested and have the time, stop by at 7 o'clock.
PM or AM?
PM.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Meeting's adjourned. No, I'll bring it tomorrow. I meant to bring it today, but I'll bring it tomorrow.
Hey, John,
I-
do you have 2 seconds?
I want to get it to you before the month.
I'm all in favor of that.
No, actually, as long as I have you and I have my email up. For a long time, I just thought I was doing something goofy. But, let's see, let's look at this one.